Today in Fulchester Crown Court, Archibald Dunbar McNeill is charged with bigamy, attempting to obtain money by deception, and knowingly making a false declaration for the purpose of obtaining a marriage license.
Your name is Anne Bolton?
No, Anne McNeill.
But your maiden name is Bolton?
Yes.
And your address is 173 Eastern Avenue, Bristol?
Yes.
On December the 28th last, you went through a marriage ceremony at Fulchester Registry Office to the accused Archibald Dunbar McNeill.
I did.
At the time of this marriage, did you believe that Archibald McNeill was free to marry you?
He told me he was a widower.
And after the marriage, did you go on your honeymoon, and did something happen?
Oh, yes, January the 6th. It was a Saturday. I shall never forget it as long as I live. Archie and I were on our honeymoon in Scarborough.
In a hotel?
Yes, the Bronte Arms. We just retired to bed.
What time was that?
About 8:30.
Please continue.
Well, suddenly there was a terrific banging at the door, and Archie got up to open it, and two people, just barged in.
Did they give any reason for their intrusion?
The lady said she was Mrs. Susan McNeill, Archie's wife. The man, Mr. Defoe, a private inquiry agent.
And this was the first time you'd heard that your husband was already married?
Well, Lord, I resent my lady friend's assumption of omniscience. Surely it is for the jury to decide whether my client was or was not married to Mrs. Susan McNeill at that time.
I agree, Mr. Lotterby.
Well, perhaps I could rephrase the question, my lord.
Perhaps you could, Mr. Logan.
Miss Bolton, until Mrs. McNeill entered your room, had you any suspicion that Mr. McNeill was other than a widower?
No, none.
Did the accused seem surprised when Mr. McNeill and Mr. Defoe entered the room?
Oh, yes, of course, we both were. It was the last thing we were expecting.
Not quite. How did Mr. McNeill react?
Well, he was shattered. He just said, "Good God, Susan," and sat on the bed. He looked awful.
As well he might. Mr. McNeill apparently recognised the lady.
Oh, yes, after the first shock, he talked to her, quite friendly.
Indeed?
He asked her how her feet were.
Oh. The situation was explained to you, was it not, by the inquiry agent?
Oh, yes, Mr. Defoe. He told me that Archie was already married and I was a bigamous wife.
How did you first meet Mr. McNeill?
Through an agency.
A matrimonial agency?
Yes, Your Lordship.
And was Mr. McNeill a client also of this agency?
Yes.
Why did you choose Mr. McNeill?
Well, he looked nice. In the photographs they showed me, and when we met, I realised I loved him.
Were you employed before you met the accused?
No, you see, I was left some property by my father, some flats. I lived on the rents.
And did you and the accused ever have any conversation about financial matters?
Yes. Archie asked me to sign the flats over into his name.
And did you agree at first?
No, well, I said, why bother? But, you see, Archie had become a Somali citizen some years before, and in a Muslim African country, a man is supposed to control all his wife's wealth.
Is that what he told you?
Yes. Well, I said, well, what if something happened to him?
And what did he reply?
He said, don't worry, darling, we'll always be together from now on.
So what did you do about the flats?
Well, I instructed my solicitor to have the flats conveyed in Archie's name.
And were they conveyed into the accused's name?
No. Before it could be done, I heard...
Yes, don't tell me what you heard, but did you talk to the accused about something that you'd heard?
Well, I told him that I'd heard that he was trying to sell the flats, that my solicitor had found out he was trying to sell the flats to a property company in Leeds.
Did he deny it?
No, he just said, don't get excited.
Did Mr. McNeill at any time discuss religion with you?
No.
You didn't know, then, that he has professed to be a Muslim?
No.
Or, moreover, that he has 3 wives in Mogadishu, all of whom he married under Muslim law?
3?
3, Miss Bolton.
Good heavens.
You had no idea of it?
No, I had no idea. Are there any children?
6, I think.
7.
7.
Mr. Logan, now that we've settled Mr. McNeill's contribution to the population explosion, may we now continue? And you will kindly not give any more evidence yourself.
As your lordship pleases. Miss Bolton, what religion did your husband say he was?
Agnostic.
That is not a religion, Miss Bolton. It is an excuse.
Well, he put down atheist on the marriage licence.
From what your husband told you, did you believe that he was free to marry you and that it was his intention to do so and to live with you for the rest of your life?
Yes.
If you had not believed those things, could you have instructed your solicitor to convey the flats into the accused's name?
No.
And if you had thought him to be a Muslim, would you have married him?
I don't know. I suppose so. After all, he is white. Personally, I've never attached much importance to religion.
Ah, but you do to marriage.
Oh, yes. Yes, indeed. What Mr. McNeil did, I was very upset, very. I thought he loved me. He's never even been in touch with me since that awful night.
My lord.
Yes, Mr. McNeil?
Might I be permitted to explain to my wife, Miss Bolton?
No, Mr. McNeil, you may not, at least not now. Your opportunity will come later.
I understand, my lord, and I do apologise to you for the interruption.
Miss Bolton, during the 10 days that you believed yourself to be the sole wife of Mr. McNeil, did he at any time discuss with you the possibility of selling your flats?
No.
Thank you, Mrs. McNeil.
When the Marriage Bureau informed you about Mr. McNeil, was the photograph the only thing about him which attracted you?
Well, I'm not a fool. I mean, when you go to a marriage agency, you take a certain risk. I mean, people are not always exactly what they seem.
Indeed not.
Well, I wanted to marry someone with a good business behind him, someone I could be sure of.
Very sensible, Miss Bolton.
Well, Mr. McNeil seemed perfect. He had this import-export business in Mogadishu, and he was a partner in a small shipping line.
You checked up on him?
Yes, I rang the Somali embassy and spoke to the commercial attaché.
And he confirmed Mr. McNeil's background?
Oh, yes. It seemed as if all my dreams had come true. We were going to live in Africa, and Mr. McNeil's such a nice man.
Miss Bolton, you told my learned friend that you and Mr. McNeil discussed the money side of your marriage.
Yes.
Oh, very sensible. If more married couples did this, there would be fewer divorce cases. Now, which of you instigated the discussion?
I don't know.
Was it Mr. McNeil?
I can't remember.
Was it you?
Yes, I think it was.
How did Mr. McNeil react when you raised the money question?
Well, he said something like, well, what an unromantic thing to talk about on a honeymoon, or something like that.
Did the question of your property prey on your mind? Did it worry you?
No.
Yet you spoke to your husband about it.
Yes.
So it must have been on your mind, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't that exactly. You see, I just didn't want to have any secrets from each other. Besides, I was worried about what was going to happen to my property when we were in Somalia.
So it would be true to say, would it not, that the possibility of selling them had crossed your mind?
Well,
please answer yes or no, Miss Bolton.
Well, yes, I suppose it must have.
Would you describe yourself as an experienced businesswoman?
No, definitely not.
Did you seek to give Mr. McNeil the impression that you were?
No, of course not.
So is it not possible that in starting negotiations to dispose of these flats of yours, Mr. McNeil was merely trying to lift part of the business burden onto his own shoulders?
My lord.
Mr. Lotterby, the witness cannot possibly answer that question.
With respect, my lord, my client is charged with attempting to obtain property by deception as well as bigamy. I'm merely trying to ascertain from this witness whether, in her view, there is any validity to that charge.
Mr. Lotterby, I'm fully aware of what you are trying to do, but it is for the jury to decide on the validity of the charge, not the witness.
As your lordship pleases. Miss Bolton, when did you and Mr. McNeil first meet?
November.
What date in November?
3rd.
So your courtship lasted nearly 2 months?
Yes, that's right.
Did you see much of each other?
Saw each other nearly every day.
You must have got to know each other pretty well during that time.
I thought we did.
Intimately?
Well, I don't know quite what you mean by that.
Did you become lovers?
Well,
Miss Bolton, the court does not wish to pry. It is merely trying to establish how well you knew each other prior to this marriage.
Well, yes, we did become lovers. 2 days after we met, actually, on a Thursday at Clearbury Mortimer. Mr. McNeil's a very affectionate man.
Was this affection mutual?
Yes.
And it would be surprising in the middle of all this mutual affection if you found time to discuss business.
Oh, we didn't discuss business.
Or religion?
No.
What sort of things did you discuss?
Well, personal things mostly, you know. I asked him about Somalia, what our life would be like in Mogadishu.
You see, Miss Bolton, what I'm trying to get at is how the question of your flats arose. Now, I find it hard to conceive that Mr. McNeil, in the midst of making love, would suddenly start asking you what property you own.
Well, it didn't happen like that. You see, he told me that he was a Somali citizen, and I wondered whether I'd have to become one too, and if so, what would happen to my flats in this country.
You were naturally concerned.
Yes.
Your concern would have been obvious to Mr. McNeil.
Yes, but I didn't tell him to go and sell them.
No, but he didn't, Miss Bolton. You yourself said he was merely negotiating with a property company in Leeds.
Yes, well, I hadn't thought of it like that.
Well, did Mr. McNeil at any time give you the impression that he was hard up, that he was in need of money?
No, Archie was very generous with money. I liked that.
Miss Bolton, I want you to think very carefully. Would you be prepared to take Mr. McNeil back after the trial?
Well, if he's married to Mrs. Susan McNeil, and if he's got all those wives in Mogadishu, how could I?
Well, that's not really an answer, Miss Bolton, is it?
Well, yes, I'd take him back.
Why?
Well, he's a very nice man. I'm very fond of him.
Thank you.
My lord, can I ask a witness a question?
No, Mr. McNeil, you may not. It is not permitted in an English court of law. Any questions must be put through your counsel.
I see, my lord. In that case, could I ask my counsel if he would ask a witness if she would be willing to change her religion to that of Islam and marry me again under Muslim law?
Well, my lord, I must protest at the accused's blatant attempt to influence the witness and win sympathy with the jury.
Mr. Logan, whether a proposal of marriage under Muslim law could be regarded as an attempt to win sympathy is, I suspect, open to question. However, Mr. McNeil, you were expressly directed to address your questions through counsel.
Well, that's what I was trying to do, my lord.
It did not appear so to me, Mr. McNeil.
I'm very sorry, my lord.
Miss Bolton,
Yes, my lord.
are you fully recovered?
No, I don't know. This was the last thing I was expecting. I don't know.